It's a trucking, transportation, and lifestyle show like none other.
Man, you call this a life?
Road Gang Radio is back for another half hour of the best transpo show in the known universe.
We come in peace. Well, actually, we're falling to pieces.
Let's see if we can achieve liftoff, Phone Master Dre.
We are back for another half hour of Road Gang Radio with your hosts, Lindsay Mack and Jimmy Lawler.
What?
Yeah.
That's a weird looking baby.
Yeah.
Can I tell you something? You know, I always like when the kids come up with new things to say. I really do, actually. I always kind of like digging into the lingo of whatever the kids are saying. I don't incorporate it, by the way. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not trying to be hip. But the one thing that came up many years ago, and it's kind of stuck around, a lot of people still kind of live there, is the expression, let's go. I love that. Let's go. And I always love it because it almost inevitably always means a turning of the tide, a shift in the momentum, what I like to call drop, D-R-O-P, a dramatic renewal of purpose. And I have to tell you, you know, Claire is a bird watcher. There's no other way to describe it. If you've seen the videos, and I've sent you a couple, right, Lindsay, of like literally the time-lapse photography. Every year she puts stuff out to make sure that the hummingbirds actually are able to nest and get their eggs going over on our porch over in Santa Clarita, California. You know, over here we got a couple of Louisiana herons that have stopped by the studio from time to time during their migration periods. There are crows out here that are kind of giving the good word about us, but warning us about a lot of the ne'er-do-wells that sometimes wander around this building. And I have to tell you, man, when it comes to the idea of birding, getting out there and seeing the world, Lindsay, I feel like when you make a commitment to it, it does make you want to say, let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go. Things have changed.
I have a beanie that says let's go, so I've been waiting for it to get cold so I can wear my let's go beanie.
Let's go.
I understand birding now that I live out in the woods, and I'm going to talk to our next wonderful guest about that. So speaking of that, our next guest is someone who's, Jim, like, the passion that Dexter has for what we're talking about is really contagious. Dexter Patterson is joining us. He's the co-founder of Wisconsin's BIPOC Birding Club and author of the brand new book, Birds of the Great Lakes. It's a really fun and accessible is a great word here, accessible guide to birding throughout the Great Lakes region. It covers more than 100 species with an emphasis on sustainability, conservation, and community. And Dexter is also the host. If this doesn't make you happy, I don't even know what will.
I'm already happy. I'm already happy.
He's host of a podcast called Bird Joy. Come on. You can't say that and not smile. He's also the CEO of Operation Bird Joy. Smiling again, guys. His mission is all about helping people rediscover the joy of connecting with nature. He's been featured on Birds in Bloom, Sierra Club, and the Audubon magazine, and he's making birding more inclusive, by the way, welcoming and downright joyful for everybody out there. Dexter, happy to have you here. Everybody, please make welcome to the show, Dexter Patterson. Good morning.
Good morning. Let's go.
Let's
go. As opposed to clap along if you feel like a room without a roof, it's peck along if you feel like a room without a roof. I have to tell you, Dexter, I opened that website, you know, when we got all the information, we got the book and everything. And I opened that website, and I swear to God, I wanted to jump through the image and onto that beach with you guys and just be a part of the action. The Birds of the Great Lakes, of course, is the book we're going to be talking about today. But there's so much more to talk about in regards to you and your love of all this stuff. The book, by the way, is spectacular. If you have anybody in your life who wants to get into birding or is already into birding, please get them this book along with a copy of the game Wingspan. It will be a double duo combination that will blow them away. Dexter, tell us your story, though. We want to know how you get into birding from the beginning. Let our listeners know where your passion for going out there and raising those binoculars and getting an up-close and personal look at, I think, one of the great, design elements of the place we call Earth.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction and for having me today. When I tell people about birds, I get that question a lot. When did you start liking birds? Why birds? When did it start? And I always tell people I've always liked birds, but I never gave them the attention they deserved. So even when I was a little kid, I'd be like, oh, red bird, yellow bird, blue bird, and not necessarily knowing what the bird was per se, but paying attention to them a little bit. But my late grandfather was a birder, and he had 11 children, folks. So he would take his kids to parks and, natural areas and things that were free. I always say if it's free, it's me. So he would take his family out into the woods, and the advice he would always tell my mom, my aunts, my uncles is pay attention. So he would say, close your eyes. What do you hear? What do you see? Like he really wanted to activate their conscious minds when they were outside. And that got passed on to me. And that simple advice of just pay attention, I started to pay attention more. And when I started to pay attention more, it's just birds are so wonderful and they're so different. And you're always learning something new. I like to call them windows to wonder, because you open one and then you open another one and you open another one. And it was just like this snowball effect of, curiosity and wonder and seeing a new bird and a new bird and a new bird, and then starting to realize, holy cow, like it isn't just a robin. It isn't just this one bird. It isn't just a crow. Like you mentioned the crow, like there are all these different birds out here. So that's where it started for me is my grandfather and my family really just kind of encouraging me to just pay attention. And I always tell people it's amazing what we see when we pay attention.
It is. And Dexter, I would have told you years ago that bird watchers were the biggest nerds. Of course, that's obviously a cliche. And then I moved out into the woods, and I find myself every morning with my face against the glass and then getting out there, and I'm like, oh, what is that? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm it. I become the bird nerd. And I realize if you're not into bird, you're the idiot, because you're missing so much of presence. And I was thinking about it, especially as it pertains to this book. Dexter, I was walking my daughter home in the woods from the bus stop the other day, and we heard a bird, and she goes, Mommy, what does a sad bird sound like? And I was like, that is such a profound question. I just always thought birds were happy because they could fly. And yes, I'm writing a song about it now. But with all that said, Dexter, I think that can you talk about what it's done for your soul and for those around you? It just done for your, I guess, happiness and the joy factor in your own life to stop and the presence that, these birds and nature have given you to be in the moment. What has that done for your own joy?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I always tell people when people ask me, why birds? Like, I grew up in a lot of urban neighborhoods, and, a lot of my friends are like, birds? Like, what? Really? You're into birds?
What happened to you, Dexter?
What happened, right? Yeah, I'm like, you know what? Proud bird nerd, I let that flag fly. But there's a lot of different reasons, but it kind of falls into three buckets for me. And the first one is mental health and well-being. I've battled mental health throughout my entire life, but what I found is when I'm in nature, and I always tell people birding isn't about the birds, it's about an outdoor experience. It's about just connecting to nature as a whole, because if you're paying attention to everything, not just the birds. But being outside, and as a scientist, I teach science communication at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and the research is clear. Just being outside, folks, makes you feel better, right? Just being outside lowers cortisol levels. If you're in the forest and you're forest bathing, you're going to see anxiety levels coming down. You're seeing depression levels coming down. So it is actually good for you. So I always find this, maybe it's been a long week. I need to decompress. I hit the trails and I come back and I feel rejuvenated. So it's the mental health, it's the well-being of it. I know when I started hiking and being a regular birder and going out all the time, I started losing weight. I started, blood pressure levels are coming down. So I was like, wow, not only mentally am I feeling better, but physically I'm feeling better. So that's number one for me, is mental and physical health and really just making you feel like a better human being every day. The next part of it is this environmental awareness component of really being connected to the world around you and understanding that you do have an impact, right? And I always say when you start to pay attention, you start to care. When you start to care, you start to do. So that's where this conservation component comes in, and really understanding your place in this universe and understanding you're just this itty bitty component of all this beauty around us. And when you do that, it's humbling, it's uplifting. You really start to understand your place in this world a little bit better. And the last one is community. in connection. I'm so honored to be able to bring people together around birds. And, I just love seeing the community, the conversation, the connection that happens amongst the group. We might have people come out. You mentioned that beach photo. That was like 40 people out that day, but then maybe a few days later, I see 3 of those people out birding together. Now they have birding buddies. Some of the most fantastic people I've ever met in this world, I've met on the trail or out in the wild, as I like to say, birding. So that community and that connection is really important. So for me, it's those 3 buckets. It's that mental health and physical health benefits, it's the environmental awareness, and it's the connection in the community.
Lindsay always asks me on Friday, and I ask her the same question as we wrap up the show. What are you doing this weekend? And I'm a daily walker. It's a constitution for me. I get out there and I book. My Friday walk is a little bit different. I walk on the banks of Lake Pontchartrain, the shores of Lake Pontchartrain. I make my way down there. And one of the things that I've started doing, because my wife is a bird watcher. That's what Claire is. It's not like something that it's like a little interest. It's a big, big interest. I've gotten to the point now where I don't actually have a distinct destination anymore. I just simply say when I see my 5th brown pelican, I turn around and go back. And you can really begin to become a bird watcher by simply becoming a walker, can't you? I mean, it's just one of the most basic things you can do. If you want to become a bird watcher, you don't need to go out there with the intention of looking at birds. If you simply make a commitment to your health and start taking walks in places where birds are going to be seen on a regular basis, that can be the beginning of a commitment, correct?
100%. And it's so funny that you mentioned that, because that's usually the first thing that I tell people is they'll ask me, well, what's birding? How do I birding? What's a birder? And I say, you know what? Start at where you live. Whether you have an apartment, a house, wherever you live, birds are there, right? You got a patio. If you're lucky to have a patio, go sit on your patio and just pay attention. Walk around the block and just pay attention. I always say, download the Merlin Bird ID app. This is a really good one, because this kind of blows people's minds, especially people that are curious or have never been birding, to really understand how many birds are actually around them at all times. So if you download the Merlin Bird ID app, it has a sound identification function, and you can hit record, and you can just walk around wherever you live, and it listens for birds. And then once it hears a bird song or a bird sound, it will pop a picture of that bird up on your phone for you. And before you know it, folks are walking around their neighborhood a couple blocks, and they're like, holy cow, there are 10 different species of birds around me. I thought it was just one. I thought it was just a bird, but there's 10 of them, or 12 or 14, depending on what time of year it might be. So I think that's what I would say, is just start small. You don't need fancy equipment. If you don't have any binoculars, that's okay. If you don't know what you're looking at, that's okay. If you don't know what you're hearing, that's okay. Just pay attention. And it's pretty cool. You can just do that. Just start walking around your neighborhood, and they're gonna be there. I always tell people, birds are moving in the sky. They're in your bushes. They're on the ground. They're in the water. They're hanging out on your apartment or your house. They're literally everywhere. So just pay attention and look for the movement. Then I say, listen to the music, right? We're on a radio show. I say, listen to the music. They're going to make some beautiful sounds, and they're going to be singing. They're going to be doing different things. And next thing you know, you start marrying those two together, movement and music and sounds. And guess who's seeing more birds? Right. So that's the approach I take. And then I say, hey, you don't need to know what you're looking at. You can figure it out later. You can use a resource like my book to figure that out. But it is fantastic. Get you the Merlin app and go for a walk.
I'm so glad you just said the Merlin app, because it was literally my next question. And we're talking about Dexter Patterson, his book, Birds of the Great Lakes. The book, by the way, even when you just look at the book, it puts yourself at peace a little bit. So if nothing else, put this book on your bedside table or on your coffee table or in your truck, and it'll just bring you a moment of present and peace. But and as it pertains to the app, because I have that app, the Merlin app, and I put it on when I go outside. But I was thinking yesterday when I was thinking, knowing that we were going to have you on and diving deep, Dexter, the idea of that app is great and it's fine and it's a nice tool. However, what is it that, say, your book and actually the writing down and a physical something we can hold in our hands and trusting our own instincts, those things are important. The AI, the apps, that stuff is a fun enhancement. But what is it, do you think, that makes this book, your work, the actual person out there, one-on-one, trusting what they're hearing and seeing, the real core of what we're doing, and the reminder that we have to trust our own instincts and what we're interested in versus what the app is telling us to be interested in?
Yeah, like I said, it's a great tool. It's not it doesn't know everything, but it can be helpful in a sense of like, I've never heard that before. What's that sound, right? I always tell people, they're like, because I bird by ear, when I'm taking people out and when I'm making my videos, I typically hear the bird first and then I try to locate it. And they're like, how do you know all these birds by sound? I said, it was one bird, one call at a time. So it is this lifelong learning process. I think that's what I love most about birds and birding as a whole, is there are so many different species, right? They're different every different season. They have different calls. They have different behaviors for different things. They change their colors. They do all these different things. So you'll never know everything. And that's part of the excitement for me, is always looking forward to learning something new. Always looking forward to seeing a new species. Always looking forward to seeing a new behavior. Always looking forward to exploring a new place. And that's part of the human element of birding, is really immersing yourself just in the experience. It is here for you all times, all seasons, no matter what. They're always going to be around and be there for you. So I think that's part of that, Lindsay, when I think about that human connection and learning and being really kind of proactively putting yourself in these environments and being intentional about learning about these birds. It's really rewarding. It's super exciting when you like hear something and you're like, oh, I know what that is now, right? Like, those moments are really fantastic. And I love seeing those moments take place on some of my bird walks and on the hikes with folks, when I'm seeing them learning something or seeing something new. That really fires me up. So yeah, there's nothing like that human to bird connection, like that real one-on-one attention. There's nothing like it. The apps are just tools. The camera is just a tool. The binocular is just a tool, but they're not a necessity for birding.
In the Birds of the Great Lakes, I have to imagine as you put this book together, you felt like you were actually creating profiles for your friends, as if you're kind of sitting down and saying, these are the friends I've made along the way.
100%.
I want you to meet them. There's so many wonderful things in here, and I've got two questions. The one is an incredibly practical one about going out and hiking. And, as one of the other things, too, if you end up being a bird watcher first, you end up becoming pretty darn good at figuring out how to actually hike in the most comfort level. So I got a couple of practical questions. But I kept, as I went through the book, I got to tell you, the bird that melted my heart the most, it's the cutest, most wondrous thing I've ever seen. And it's so simple. I've seen them before. The pied-billed grebe. And Lindsay, it melted my heart. It is, it looks like a duck, but it essentially comes from the grebe family. It's got, certain kind of, it just uses the water to hide. It is the most adorable thing I've ever seen. Have there been any birds on your first encounter with them that really, truly stopped you in your tracks and melted your heart?
100%. And people ask me this all the time, and they're kind of shocked at my answer, but it's the male house finch for me. Every single time I see the male house finch, especially in the spring when he starts singing and letting people know, I'm here, spring is coming, and trying to entertain its mate, and his little chest and his throat is all red, and they're just the cutest little things in the world. I love a male house finch, and that's bird joy for me. I don't care how many times I see these common birds, they still melt my heart, right? And I think a lot of times what happens with people as they go on year by year and they start adding to what we would call a lifer list, is like how many birds you've seen, and they start keeping track of how many birds they've seen. They start to lose their joy a bit, and they start more focusing on checking off another bird on their list. And now it's not about the experience anymore. It's not about the joy. You're not appreciating the male house finch or the pied-billed grebe that I get to see on my local lakes every single year. And I just love that they're so tiny and so adorable, but they can dive, so deep into the lake and they're snatching fish and coming back up, and you're just like blown away that this little bitty adorable little thing is a predator, right? Like, it's kind of crazy to see something so cute come up with a big old fish in that pied-billed green field. But
It's like Yoda. It's like Yoda against the Emperor. It's like this little tiny guy pulls out a lightsaber.
Like, how is this possible? Like, how did you just do that? You were gone for like 20 seconds, and now you're back with a fish. You know, like, it blows my mind every single time I see it. But it's those common birds. It's the house finch. It's the American robin. When they start hopping across my lawn looking for worms as the snow starts to melt, like, I pay attention to them every single year, and I adore them every single time because I appreciate them, you know, and I think a lot of people lose that. And that is my call to everybody. Like, I'm always trying to tell people, do not lose your joy. Once you do that, like, you're just really kind of cheating yourself, I feel like, from all this joy that's surrounding you at all times. So focus on the joy. Focus on the common birds that you always see. They're always doing something different. If you actually pay attention to them, you will learn something new. So that would be my advice to folks out there.
Really quickly, before Lindsay's got a couple of things for you, I want to just kind of ask you a couple of hiking questions as well. Are you a trail mix guy or a snack bar guy?
You know, I'm probably more of a trail mix person. You know, I see too many wrappers from like the snack bars and stuff on the trail, so pick up after yourselves when you're out there. Usually with the trail mix, you don't eat it all, and people keep their bags with them. But I'm a nutty guy.
And my final question is, have you become an expert on what kind of shoes to wear? Because often we're covering a lot of ground. Is there a recommendation you have for folks, particularly in areas of the world that have 4 seasons like where you're living, about the kind of shoes maybe you want to invest in if you're going to keep this up as a regular habit?
Yeah, you want comfortable shoes, and you definitely want a nice hiking, actually something that is built for the trail. If it can be waterproof, that's even better. So I have a pair of waterproof hiking boots that I wear typically. And really, you can do research on where you're going to go. I think that's really helpful. Birdability.org is a really good resource in regards to trail information across the country. They give you accessibility information. How long is the trail? What type of trail is it? Do they have bathrooms? Like, a lot of really fantastic information. So shout out to Birdability. But knowing where you're going is important because that will determine what it is. Pay attention to what the weather is going to be. We actually have snow in the forecast for us tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon.
We heard
here in Wisconsin.
I heard.
I know, right?
They called to tell us. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, it's been crazy. So pay attention to where you're going. Pay attention to the weather apps and dress accordingly. Be careful, understanding, you know, your safety is, you know, paramount and number one. Last thing I want somebody to do is hit the trail and not go back.
And if you're, by the way, if you have any anxiety at all, don't go to birdsaren'treal.com. I'm sure that phenomenon makes you crazy. We're not even going to go there. No. Somebody just jokingly mentioned that over the chat.
They've been on the show. We pushed back. My wife, Claire, was like, you live in a kingdom of lies. Leave now.
Come on. Birds aren't spies. Birds aren't spies. Okay. My real quick question before I go into the other piece that we can do some sort of practical stuff for our listeners. But my husband just texted Dexter, and he wants to know, what's your white whale moment of a bird? What is your in the words of Moby Dick? What is that elusive bird that you are constantly hoping will appear at one point?
For me, is the Kirtland's warbler. And that warbler is it's starting to rebound a bit. It is an adorable little bird. But they nest in very specific areas that have young jack pine trees. And we are lucky enough to have some areas in the state of Wisconsin and nearby Michigan and Illinois where you can see these birds. But it has eluded me. It has eluded me, and I think I just need to maybe try a little harder. I'm not a chase a bird type guy either, so like, you know, I'm not gonna, you know, see a report of a Kirtland's warbler 3-4 hours away, and I'm like in my car driving to go see it. Like I take a more relaxed approach to birding. Like, I'll see you eventually, and I think that's part of the excitement. But for me, I would have to say it's the Kirtland's warbler. I've had multiple people reach out to me as I've been sharing this story with people and saying, hey, I can get you one. So hopefully this spring I'll probably get one.
And then what can, on that note, just people, anybody listening that, I mean, I think that perhaps sometimes a good way to get into it is just realizing how we can, even at our own home, our own property, our own daily lives, support the birds around us, support nature. So how can quote unquote everyday people protect the birds that they love to watch, even just in their backyard?
Yeah, if you're lucky enough to have a backyard, putting up bird feeders is a really good way to do it, especially right now. Fall migration is in full effect. Winter is coming no matter where you are, so food resources are more scarce for them during the winter. Putting up heated bird baths is another one.
Oh, it's so nice.
Having water features. Yeah, water features in your yard will bring them in. Birds hear water. So if you have a water feature, that's definitely going to bring them in. They're always looking for fresh water. And that's a good way for you to start to see what's around you. Your next thing you know, you're like, holy cow, I didn't know I had this bird here. And it's in my yard, and I'm looking at it. So bird feeders are a really good way, as well as those water features, providing some water for them.
Love it.
I got to tell you, man, you say, bringing joy to birding, you have brought joy to this show. We are so pleased to have you. And we've been able to say this to so many guests this morning. We can tell you the same thing. You're welcome back anytime. By the way, guys, go to wiscobirder.com. That's WISCO, of course, for Wisconsin. Birder.com. You will find a great deal of joy waiting for you. Also, if you purchase Birds of the Great Lakes, it's by Dexter Patterson. He has joined us this morning. I hope you have the best of weekends. I hope the snow brings out other kinds of birds that you can look at and enjoy. Thank you, and happy Friday to you.
Thank you so much. This has been a joy.